Hey, I'm Sophia. Before we start, go grab a snack and get comfortable for a bit. These stories take their time, and they are told the way I'd tell a friend late at night. I really hope you enjoy them. This story has one update on it and my own opinion at the end. Comment and tell me if you agree. Let's begin. I caught my brother lying about my career. I exposed him and built my own success. I was standing in the doorway of my parents' dining room, still holding the salad bowl I'd just brought in from the kitchen, when I heard my brother laugh and say, "Well, you know how it is, Aunt Denise. Social media stuff isn't a real job. Hannah's basically, like, unemployed right now. Mom and Dad have to help her with rent." My hands went numb. I watched, frozen, as my aunt's eyebrows shot up in that sympathetic way that really means yikes. My dad chuckled awkwardly. My mom pursed her lips like she was holding in an opinion. No one corrected him. No one said, "Actually, that's not true." I felt my face flush hot, my heart starting to beat in that horrible pulsing way in my ears. My phone was in my back pocket, screen still open on the email I'd been rereading obsessively all week. "We're excited to confirm you as the lead consultant on the Johnson & Company brand strategy project." I put the salad bowl down way too hard. The cutlery clattered, and everyone turned to look at me. My brother, Jake, met my eyes, smirked slightly, and raised his glass like we were in on some private joke. To back up, I'm Hannah, 30F. Jake is my younger brother, 27M, and the golden child of our family. If you asked my parents, they'd say they love us equally, but the evidence board would disagree. Jake's the serious one, with the proper job in real business. Their words, not mine. I've always been the creative one, which apparently translates to person we don't quite understand, so we downplay her life choices. I work in brand strategy and digital marketing. It's the kind of job where you're not always employed in a neat, full-time, easily labeled role. Sometimes you're in-house, sometimes you consult, sometimes you freelance. The money's been decent for a while, but it doesn't come with a single tidy job title my parents can brag about at church, so in their heads it's perpetually temporary. Jake, on the other hand, has a shiny LinkedIn headline: Business Development Manager at Fairmont Financial Group. Suit, tie, company car. He's good at selling things, mainly himself. He's always known how to work a room. He was the kid teachers loved because he could charm them into letting him hand in assignments late. For years, I just shrugged off the imbalance. When Mom would gush about Jake's big promotion, I'd quietly share that I'd landed a new client and she'd say, "That's nice, dear. Is it stable?" When Dad talked about how proud he was of Jake's career, he'd call what I do your projects like it was an Etsy side hustle I'd get over when I grew up. What I didn't know was that Jake wasn't just benefiting from their ignorance. He was actively feeding it. The first real red flag should have been the recruiter. About 6 months before the salad incident, I'd been in the running for a pretty big in-house role at a tech company. The interview process had been going well. 3 rounds, a portfolio presentation, some emails that started including phrases like, "When you join." Then suddenly, radio silence. After a few weeks, I got a polite, generic rejection email. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates at this time." It stung, but I've worked long enough to know rejection happens. I moved on. Then, 2 months later, I bumped into one of the junior marketers from that company at a networking event. We got chatting about past roles and she said, "Oh yeah, I remember your name from our internal chatter. You're the freelancer whose reference was weird, right?" My brain glitched. "My oi reference." She frowned. "Yeah, didn't you list your brother as your character reference?" The HR lady said he sort of implied you were, like, super talented but not very reliable? That you get overwhelmed and flake on things? It caused a bit of debate. She laughed. In that way people do when they think they're just recounting gossip. Anyway, they ended up going with someone with more corporate experience. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I did not list my brother as a reference. I always use former managers and clients, people who actually know my work. I managed to keep my voice steady enough to say, "Oh, that's strange. I don't remember doing that." That night, I tore through my sent mail, checking the application. My reference list was exactly what I remembered. 2 former creative directors and a client.
No jaque.
I called HR the next day under the guise of wanting feedback to improve. When I gently asked about the reference situation, the HR woman hesitated, then said, "We were told by a mutual contact, your brother, I believe, that he could provide some personal context." "Did I give you his name?" I asked. "Well, he reached out to us directly," she admitted. "Said he'd heard you were in the running and wanted to be transparent. That's not really standard procedure, but he was very polite." I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there staring at the wall. My own brother had contacted a company I was interviewing with and painted me as unreliable. He hadn't said I was incompetent, but that talented but flaky narrative is poison for someone like me. Especially when I'd spent years trying to prove I wasn't the stereotypical messy creative. I confronted him over text first, because I was too angry to trust myself on the phone. "Did you contact Fairmont Tech about my job application?" He replied almost immediately. "Relax, I was trying to help. I know one of the guys in leadership there. Just gave some personal insight. Didn't think you'd get so far with it, TBH." My vision went white around the edges. "What did you say?" "Just that you're brilliant, but you've struggled with burnout before, and sometimes take on too much." "It's not a lie, Han. You're always stressed." I didn't want them to crush you. I stared at the messages, heart pounding. This was the same brother who'd repeatedly joked that my little jobs weren't as serious as his. Now suddenly, he was the guardian of my mental well-being, sabotaging my chances in the name of protecting me. I typed and deleted about 50 responses. Everything from, "How dare you," to "You don't get to make those decisions for me." In the end, I sent, "Never contact a potential employer of mine again. Ever." He left it on read. I told myself it was a one-off, a misguided attempt at Big Brother knows best, even though I'm the older one. I told myself he didn't understand how much damage a few vague comments can do. I told myself he wouldn't do it again. Then the salad bowl incident happened. Standing there in my parents' dining room, listening to him tell our aunt that I was basically unemployed, while I was in the middle of negotiating a contract that would pay more in 6 months than his salary, something in me snapped. "I'm not unemployed," I said, louder than I meant to. The room went quiet. Jake turned slowly, eyebrows raised like I was being dramatic. "I was just saying," he said, "you're between proper jobs. It's not bad." I walked over to the table, pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and slammed it down in front of him. "Open on the incoming transfer from my last project. Does that look like unemployment to you?" My dad frowned. "Hannah, there's no need to make a scene." "Yes," I said, shaking now, "there is. Because this isn't just dinner table teasing, Dad. Jake cost me a job." Jake's face changed. It was quick, a flicker, but I saw it. The oh shit moment. I turned to my parents. "Remember that in-house role I was excited about a few months ago? The one I kept talking about?" They told me they got a personal reference saying I was unreliable and burn out easily. They said it came from a mutual contact, my brother. Mum's hand flew to her mouth. "Jake." He held up his hands. "I was looking out for her," he said quickly. "You know what she's like, Mum. She runs herself into the ground. I didn't want her jumping into some high-pressure job she couldn't handle." It was such a neat little lie, sealed with faux concern. For a second, I almost doubted myself. Then I remembered the recruiter's exact words. He implied you're not very reliable. "You didn't talk to me," I said. My voice cracked, but I kept going. "You didn't ask how I felt about it. You just decided you knew what was best for me and sabotaged it behind my back. And now you're telling people I'm unemployed, so what? So you look more successful by comparison." Jake rolled his eyes. "Not everything is about you, Han." I laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. "You know what? You're right. For the first time in my life, I'm going to make sure it is about me." I picked up my phone, walked to the head of the table where my parents sat, and opened my email. "This," I said, showing them the screen, "is the contract for my new retainer client. I'll make more this year than Jake does." This, I flicked to another email. is my portfolio. These are the brands paying me because I'm good at what I do. And this, I open the HR email with the mention of Jake's unsolicited reference, is what happens when your golden boy big shot son decides my career is his business. Mom looked from the screen to Jake, her face pale. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle pulsing. My aunt stared like she'd accidentally tuned into a soap opera. Jake pushed his chair back, defensive. You're blowing this way out of proportion, he snapped. I just made a call. It's not my fault they listened to me. Why did you even call? I asked. Why were you watching my LinkedIn that closely? Why did you care enough to insert yourself into my process? He opened his mouth, shut it, and finally muttered, I know people. It's normal to check in about candidates. For HR, I shot back. Not for jealous little brothers. Mom finally spoke. Jake, did you really tell them she burns out easily? He shrugged. I said she gets overwhelmed, which she does. You've said that yourself, Mom. Mom looked like she'd just swallowed something bitter and realized it was her own words. I wish I could say that after that dinner, my parents dramatically took my side and Jake sobbed an apology. They didn't. They were shaken, sure. Mom cried in the kitchen with me later, saying she never meant to make me feel lesser. Dad muttered something about boundaries to Jake. But mostly, everyone wanted it to blow over. I went home that night and sat on my bed, staring at my laptop. My life, up until that point, had been like one long audition for their approval. I'd chosen creative but respectable careers, made safe choices, tried to translate my weird, fluid industry into parent-friendly bullet points. I'd been letting Jake sit in the position of commentator on my life like he'd earned it. So I did something I'd been too scared to do before. I stopped contorting my dreams to fit their idea of proper success, and I built something that didn't require any of them to sign off. I formalized my freelance work into an actual business. Registered the name, got an accountant, set up a proper site instead of the half-finished portfolio I'd been meaning to update when I had time. I niched down into exactly what I was good at: brand strategy and content for small businesses run by women and queer folks who were sick of being talked over. I treated myself like a real client. Clean brand, clear messaging, posted my work instead of hiding it because it's not perfect yet. I reached out to everyone I'd ever worked with who'd said, if you ever go out on your own, I'd love to hire you. A surprising number of them meant it. Within 6 months, I had more inquiries than I could handle alone. Within a year, I brought on a part-time designer. I moved out of my dingy share house into a small apartment that was entirely mine. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand from Facebook Marketplace. I put my award and my business registration certificate on the wall, framed, in the living room where anyone could see them. My parents saw what I was doing through Instagram, mostly. They were cautious at first, the way you watch someone walking across a rope bridge. But then they saw one of my clients mentioned in an article, saw my business name in the credits. Dad called and said, awkwardly, looks like the project is going well. It's not a project, I told him. It's my company. Jake and I barely spoke. He sent one half-hearted text a few weeks after the dinner. Sorry if I overstepped. I'll stay out of your job stuff from now on. I stared at the if for a long time, then archived the message without replying. People always talk about cutting off toxic partners, but they don't talk enough about quietly demoting family members from main characters to background extras. That's what I did with Jake. I didn't block him. I just stopped running new chapters past him for commentary. And in the space his opinion used to occupy, something huge and quiet grew. My own. If this is already too long, sorry. I guess I just needed to say, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do after someone lies about your career is to build it so big and so solid that their version becomes laughable. Because now, when Aunt Denise asks, so, is your social media stuff going okay? I don't look at Jake to see if he approves. I just smile and say, yeah, I run my own agency now. It's going really well. And it is. If we freeze frame the story right here, I am standing and slow clapping for Opie. This is the quiet revenge arc I live for. No destroying careers, no messy public takedowns, just receipts, boundaries, and then a glow-up so undeniable even the family grapevine has to adjust its narrative. Jake, at this point, is a walking LinkedIn endorsement gone wrong. He's the guy who thinks I know people gives him a moral license to meddle in processes that have nothing to do with him. He weaponizes concern to justify what is essentially sabotage, saying, "She's talented but unreliable," to an HR department is like putting a landmine in the middle of someone's career path and then acting surprised when they lose a leg. The parents are a classic case of death by 1,000 minimizations. They don't wake up thinking, how do we crush Hannah's spirit today? But they absolutely participate in a system where Jake's milestones are framed as achievements and Hannah's are framed as little projects. The proper job versus social media stuff rhetoric is painfully real. If I had $1 for every millennial whose parents think marketing is just playing on Instagram, I'd be paying all our therapy bills. OP's decision to stop translating, stop auditioning, and start building is the heart of this story. She doesn't burn it all down. She quietly sets up a new stage and invites clients instead of relatives. That's huge. But we're not done. We still haven't seen whether Jake ever truly gets called out or whether the parents fully clock how serious his interference was. We also haven't seen how OP's success plays out once it stops being ignorable. So yes, we require an update. So a lot has happened since that dinner, and since I posted this. I didn't expect this much to change in a year and a bit, to be honest. A few months after I officially launched my business, I got an email that felt like cosmic poetic justice. It was from the same tech company I'd originally interviewed with, the one Jake had called to help. A new HR manager introduced herself and said she'd been going through old candidate files while preparing to hire an external consultant. My portfolio had stood out back then, and now they needed exactly the kind of brand strategy one specializes in. "We'd like to explore working with you on a contract basis," she wrote. "Your work is impressive, and our team has heard good things about your recent projects." I stared at the email, then laughed so hard I scared my neighbor's cat through the thin wall. I took the contract. It turned into one of my biggest clients. I didn't mention the reference debacle. There was no point. The work would speak louder than any rambling call from Jake ever could. Financially, I'm in a better position than I've ever been. I'm not driving a Porsche or anything, but I'm comfortable. I have savings. I have systems. I don't wake up at 3 a.m. panicking about whether a random recruiter's opinion will determine whether I can pay rent. The family dynamics have shifted. Not magically, not all at once, but noticeably. Mom started following my business page on Instagram and actually commenting things like, "So proud of you" under case study posts. They're a bit mom cringe, my clever girl, but they're public. She's not hiding me behind Josh anymore. Dad, who used to introduce me as Hannah, she does, creative stuff with social media, now says, "This is my daughter. She runs her own branding agency." The first time he said it in front of me at a neighbor's barbecue, I had to stare at a bowl of chips very intently, so I wouldn't cry. And Jake? Well, about 6 months ago, his company went through a round of layoffs. He wasn't fired, but his role changed, and the shiny upward path he'd been on suddenly looked more like a treadmill. Around the same time, one of my clients, a sustainable clothing brand, was looking for someone to help with partnerships and sales. They mentioned they were struggling to find someone who understood both business development and digital. I thought of Jake. Then I thought of how he'd called my prospective employer and tanked my shot at stability for my own good. I didn't recommend him. That's going to sound petty to some people, and maybe it is. But the difference between what he did and what I did is consent. He interfered without telling me, framing me as unreliable to people I was actively trying to impress. I quietly declined to offer him an opportunity he didn't even know existed. He still texts occasionally. For a long time it was surface-level stuff, memes, family logistics. "You coming to Sunday lunch?" I went sometimes, skipped other times. When we were in the same room, he oscillated between pretending nothing had happened and making little digs about influencer culture. I mostly ignored him. The big confrontation part, too, came at Christmas. My parents did their usual big lunch, and for once, the house was full of people who actually knew what I do. One of my clients turned friends, Lana, is also my mom's Pilates instructor. She and her partner came for dessert because their families are interstate. At some point, Mom proudly introduced me to a family friend as the genius behind Lana's rebrand. The friend asked a bunch of questions about my work. I answered them. It was normal. Nice even. Later, as I was loading the dishwasher, I heard Jake say from behind me, "Must be nice to have everyone kissing your arse for once." I closed the dishwasher slowly and turned around. He was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, expression halfway between smug and sulky. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "You've got them all fooled," he said. "Mom acts like you're the next Steve Jobs because you made some logos and Instagram posts. I do actual business deals, but whatever." There it was. The raw thing under all the smirks and concern. Jealousy. I took a breath. "I don't have anyone fooled," I said. "I just stopped letting you narrate my life." He snorted. "Oh, please. You've always needed someone to translate your chaos. You melt down if a client email sounds a bit stern. I was just trying to keep you from getting in over your head." My chest went tight. I thought of the recruiter's voice. "We heard from your brother you struggle with burnout." "Do you hear how arrogant that sounds?" I asked. "You, the younger brother, deciding from your corporate throne what I can handle, then calling my potential employers to give your blessing or not. You don't get to gatekeep my career." He rolled his eyes and turned to leave. I stopped him. "Jake." He paused. "I know about the call to Fairmont wasn't a one-time thing." His shoulders stiffened. "The tech company that just hired me as a consultant?" I said. "HR told me you rang them too." "You shared some context. Do you just have Google alerts on my name, or what?" He spun around, defensive. "I have contacts. I was trying to help." "You're so ungrateful. You were trying to stay one rung above me on some imaginary family ladder," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't look away. "But here's the thing. I'm not on that ladder anymore. I built a different one. You can either treat me like an equal adult with a real career, or you can stay on whatever weird rung you've carved out. I don't care, but you don't get to interfere in my work again. Ever. If you do, I will consider it harassment, and I will respond accordingly." He laughed. "What? You'll sue me?" "If I have to," I said calmly. "Or I'll do something even worse for you. I'll tell every hiring manager you know exactly how you operate behind closed doors. So when you name drop your network, they'll know what that means." For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not because I'm some terrifying villain, but because he realized I wasn't bluffing. I know people now, too. And mine actually respect me. We were interrupted by Mum calling us for dessert. The moment broke. But something fundamental had shifted. Since then, Jake's been quieter. He doesn't comment on my job, positively or negatively. He doesn't make jokes about my little business. He certainly doesn't call any more HR departments. If he talks about me, it's more in the "my sister runs her own agency" way than the "she does social media stuff" way. I don't think it's because he's had a moral awakening. I think it's because he finally understands there are consequences. That's enough for me. As for my parents, they're on a learning curve. We've had some awkward but important talks about how they talk about their kids' work. They've started asking questions instead of making assumptions. Mum told me the other day, "I used to think a steady salary and a ladder to climb were the only real markers of success. But seeing you build something, I'm proud of your courage." I cried in my car after that one. I'm not saying everything is perfect now. It isn't. There are still moments where I feel 12 years old at that dinner table, trying to convince everyone my art project matters as much as Jake's trophy. But those moments pass faster now. Because I have proof I don't need them to validate me. A client list, a tax return, a lease in my own name, a business that exists regardless of whether my brother believes in it. I caught my brother lying about my career. I exposed him, not with a dramatic Facebook post, but with facts and boundaries and, yes, a little bit of ice. Then I did the most powerful thing I could. I built a life where his lies just don't fit anymore. And honestly, That feels better than any apology he could have given me. Okay, round 2 on the judgment couch. Let's rate this cast. Opie. Hannah 10 out of 10, no notes, would absolutely read her memoir. What makes her compelling isn't just that she's competent, it's that we watch her move from seeking permission to granting it to herself. She starts the story still half believing the family narrative that her work is less real, even as her bank account and clients say otherwise. By the end, she has verifiable proof of success and the emotional maturity to stop chasing validation from people who've shown they can't give it cleanly. Her revenge is deeply satisfying because it's not about destroying Jake, it's about making his opinion irrelevant. That's the highest form of I'm over it. Jake, phew. He is not twirling a villain mustache, but he is absolutely, unequivocally in the wrong. The unsolicited references, the framing of sabotage as protection, the must be nice to have people kissing your arse line. Classic insecure golden child energy. He needs to be the one on top in the family narrative, so he rewrites reality to keep it that way. The wild part is he probably doesn't see himself as malicious. He sees himself as the rational one rescuing his flaky sister from her own ambition. That combination of entitlement and self-righteousness is dangerous. The only redeeming sliver is that, when faced with real consequences, he does back off. He doesn't double down, which is something. Mom and Dad, they are the embodiment of we did our best, not being the same as we did well. They didn't intentionally harm her, but they absolutely participated in minimizing her achievements and overpraising Jake's. The proper job comments, the little projects, the willingness to believe Jake's version of things. Those small cuts added up. But they earned some redemption in the update. Mom publicly cheering OP's wins. Dad finally using the word agency instead of stuff. Their attempts to understand a non-traditional career. They're late to the party, but at least they showed up. A lot of Reddit parents never do. The tech recruiter and HR people, minor characters, but unintentionally helpful. By being candid with Opie about what Jake said, they handed her the missing piece of the puzzle. They didn't handle everything perfectly. Taking an unsolicited sibling reference is dubious, but their later decision to hire her as a consultant is karmic balance. Overall, this isn't a story about dramatic no-contact ultimatums. It's about recalibrating who gets a voice in your life. Opie doesn't blow up the family group chat or stage a viral call-out. She quietly collects receipts, draws a line, and then builds a reality so solid that the old lies ring hollow. In the end, Jake isn't destroyed. He's just demoted, from narrator of her story to a side character whose approval she no longer needs. And honestly, that demotion? That's the real revenge.